I stood at the end of the driveway, staring at the blue ribbon stretched across the front porch of the house I'd spent the last 10 years building. At first, I thought I'd driven to the wrong address. There were balloons tied to the mailbox. A catering tent covered the front lawn. Neighbors filled the driveway, laughing and taking pictures. My parents stood proudly on the porch, smiling as if they were hosting the happiest day of their lives. Then I noticed my younger sister, Emily. She was wearing a white dress, holding a giant pair of ceremonial scissors, the same scissors people use for grand openings. Confused, I walked toward the crowd. My mother spotted me immediately. "There she is," she announced with a bright smile. Perfect timing. Several relatives turned to wave at me. I smiled politely, still trying to understand what was happening. "What's all this?" I asked. Dad wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders. "Today is a fresh start." Emily grinned. "I've finally got a place of my own." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Mom laughed softly. "Oh, Sarah, don't look so serious." Then she reached into a small velvet box. Inside was a single silver house key. She placed it into Emily's hand. "Congratulations, sweetheart. This house is yours." The crowd erupted in applause. For a second, I honestly thought it was a joke. Someone would laugh. Someone would say they were filming a prank. Nobody did. Emily held up the keys like she'd won an award. My aunt hugged her. My cousins cheered. Even the neighbors clapped. Then Emily turned toward me with a smug little smile. "Thanks for building my dream house." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was comfortable, like everyone believed this was perfectly normal. I looked at my parents. Neither of them seemed embarrassed. My father actually looked relieved, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. I took one slow breath, then reached into my handbag, pulled out a folded document, and smiled. "Congratulations, Emily," she beamed. "I hope you are very happy here." "I will be." I nodded. "I'm sure you will." I unfolded the document. "You own the house." I paused just long enough for everyone to relax. "But," I looked directly at my parents, "I still own the land underneath it." The applause stopped instantly. Silence spread across the yard. Emily blinked. "What?" Dad frowned. "What are you talking about?" I folded the paper again. "Did either of you finish reading Grandma Grace's will?" No one answered. 12 years earlier, my grandmother had called me into her hospital room. She looked tired, smaller than I'd ever seen her, but her eyes were still sharp. "Sarah." I sat beside her bed and held her hand. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything." She smiled. "Don't ever let someone convince you that being kind means giving away everything you worked for." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. A week later, she was gone. At the reading of her will, my parents barely paid attention. Grandma didn't leave anyone a fortune. There were a few family heirlooms, some savings, and one small piece of land on the edge of town, just under 2 acres, rocky, overgrown, worth almost nothing. Everyone assumed it was sentimental. Grandma left it to me. Emily rolled her eyes. "Lucky you." Mom whispered, "What are you supposed to do with a field?" I smiled. "I don't know yet." Grandma's attorney handed me one final envelope before I left. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this after the reading." Inside was a handwritten note. It said, "Sarah, land teaches patience. People will always chase what's already built. Very few understand the value of the foundation beneath it. Love, Grandma." I kept that note 12 years. At 22, I had almost nothing. Student loans, a tiny apartment, 2 jobs. During the day, I worked as a legal assistant. At night, I attended law school. Every paycheck went somewhere. Tuition, rent, bills, savings. Friends bought new cars. I drove the same old sedan until the air conditioning stopped working. Friends traveled. I stayed home studying property law. People assumed I had no life. The truth was, I was building one, slowly, quietly, one sacrifice at a time. Years later, I passed the bar. Eventually, I specialized in real estate law. I helped families protect their homes, prevent fraud, resolve inheritance disputes. Ironically, I spent my career making sure strangers never lost property through paperwork. I never imagined I'd one day need that knowledge for my own family. When I turned 31, construction finally began. Not on a mansion, just a modest three-bedroom home, large enough for a future family, with a wraparound porch exactly like Grandma's. Every brick represented overtime. Every window represented another weekend spent working instead of resting. When the house was finally finished, I cried. Not because it was perfect, because it was mine, or so I thought. Emily visited often after the house was completed. She loved showing it off on social media. "This kitchen is gorgeous. I wish I lived somewhere like this." She took hundreds of pictures. Sometimes she posted them online without mentioning whose house it actually was. People left comments. "Congratulations." She never corrected them. At first, I laughed it off. She'd always liked attention. Growing up, Emily never had to earn it. She simply expected it. If she wanted a new phone, my parents found the money. If she quit another job, they covered her bills. When she crashed her second car, Dad emptied part of his retirement savings to help replace it. Whenever I questioned it, Mom always gave the same answer. "Sarah," she said, "you're stronger than she is." It became the family motto. Emily needed protecting. Sarah would understand. 3 weeks before the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Mom called unexpectedly. "We're having a family barbecue." "No special occasion? Just family." I smiled. "I'll be there." Now, standing in my own front yard, I realized the barbecue had never existed. It was only an excuse to get me there. Emily stepped closer. "I don't understand. You said I own the house." "You do. Then why can't I live here?" "I didn't say you couldn't." I looked toward my parents. "I simply said you don't own the land underneath it." Dad laughed nervously. "Sarah," he said, "don't make a scene." "I'm not." He frowned. "You signed the construction paperwork yourself." "Correct. And you transferred the property?" "No." I shook my head. "You transferred the structure. The land was never yours to transfer." Mom's smile disappeared. "What?" I reached into my handbag again. This time I removed Grandma's original deed, still sealed inside a protective folder. "The land has always remained in my name." My father's face turned white. "That's impossible." "It isn't." Emily looked from me to Dad. "Dad, what is she talking about?" He couldn't answer, because he already knew, or at least he suspected. The crowd began to whisper. Neighbors exchanged confused looks. One of my uncles quietly stepped away from the porch. Even the real estate agent who had prepared the transfer documents looked uncomfortable. Then a voice spoke from behind the crowd. Actually, everyone turned. An older man in a gray suit slowly walked forward. I recognized him immediately. Mr. Howard, Grandma's attorney. He looked at my parents. "I warned you this would happen." Mom's eyes widened. "You said the paperwork was complete." "I said the paperwork for the house was complete." He adjusted his glasses. "I also told you the land could never be transferred without Sarah's written consent." The silence that followed felt endless. Emily stared at the keys in her hand, then back at me. "You knew?" I nodded. "I knew." "Why didn't you stop this?" I looked at every person gathered in the yard, then answered quietly. "Because sometimes people don't believe the truth until they embarrass themselves with a lie." No one said another word. The celebration was over. Guests began leaving without saying goodbye. The balloons still swayed in the afternoon breeze. The ribbon remained tied across the porch. But suddenly, it looked less like the entrance to a new beginning and more like the scene of a mistake no one could undo. As I turned to walk back toward my car, Mr. Howard called my name. "Sarah." I stopped. He held out a thick manila envelope. "I think it's time you finally saw the rest of your grandmother's instructions." I frowned. "The rest?" "I wasn't allowed to give these to you until someone in your family ever tried to take the property." A cold feeling settled in my chest. Inside that envelope was a secret my grandmother had protected for 12 years. A secret that would prove my parents' betrayal was only the beginning. I stared at the thick manila envelope in Mr. Howard's hands. "The rest of Grandma's instructions?" I asked. He nodded. "She told me I was only allowed to give this to you if someone in your family ever tried to take the property from you." My mother stepped forward. "What instructions?" Mr. Howard looked at her calmly. "The instructions your mother specifically asked me to keep confidential." Dad's face had gone completely pale. Emily looked from one person to another. "Can someone please tell me what's happening?" No one answered. Mr. Howard handed me the envelope. "Don't open it here." "Why not?" "Because once you read what's inside," he glanced at my parents, "this family will never be the same." That night, I sat alone at my dining table. The celebration balloons were still visible through my living room window, slowly losing air in the evening breeze. I carefully opened Grandma's envelope. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a handwritten letter. The second was a certified copy of her will. The third made my heart stop. It was a contract, signed 12 years earlier, by my grandmother, my parents, and Mr. Howard. I began reading. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means something I feared has finally happened. I loved your parents dearly, but I also knew their greatest weakness. They confuse protecting one child with sacrificing another. They have done it before. They will probably do it again. That is why I arranged things differently." I swallowed hard. The letter continued. "The land belongs only to you. If anyone ever pressures you to give it away, remember something. People who truly love you never ask you to surrender your future so someone else can avoid the consequences of theirs." Tears blurred the page. Then I unfolded the contract. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, "Restrictive Property Covenant." According to the agreement, no structure built on Grandma's land could ever be sold, refinanced, transferred, demolished, or developed without my written approval, not even by future owners. I leaned back in my chair. Emily hadn't inherited a home. She had inherited a problem. The next morning, my phone rang. Mom. I ignored it. Then Dad. Then Emily. Finally, a number I didn't recognize. "Sarah Bennett, this is Michael Lawson. I'm with Horizon Development. I believe you recently became aware of a title issue involving your property." I frowned. "How do you know about that?" "We've been trying to purchase every property on Willow Creek Road." My pulse quickened. "I don't understand." "There will be a major highway expansion. We've already secured agreements from every homeowner, except one." I already knew the answer. "Mine?" "Actually," he paused, "both yours." An hour later, I sat across from Michael inside Horizon's downtown office. He spread several maps across the conference table. A thick red line cut directly through my neighborhood. "The state approved the highway 6 months ago." He pointed toward my land. "Your property is the final piece. If we acquire it, the development is worth nearly $60 million. I stared at the map. "So that's why everyone suddenly wanted my house." Michael looked confused. "What do you mean?" I explained everything. The ceremony, the transfer, the forgotten will, the attorney. By the time I finished, he looked stunned. "I don't think your family understands what they've done." "What exactly have they done?" He folded his hands. "They promised us something they legally don't control." That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. This time, no balloons, no music, no smiling relatives, only silence. Emily opened the door. Her eyes were red from crying. "Can we talk?" "We're going to." She stepped aside. Inside, my parents sat at the kitchen table exactly where they'd spent years making decisions about my future without asking me. Dad stood as I entered. We made a mistake. I didn't answer. Mom wiped tears from her face. We never wanted this. No? I placed Grandma's covenant on the table. Then what exactly did you want? Silence. Finally, Dad spoke. We thought you'd understand. I almost smiled. There it is. What? The sentence I've heard my entire life. Mom looked confused. Sarah? No. I raised my hand. I've understood every sacrifice you've asked me to make. I understood when Emily crashed 2 cars and you used your retirement savings. I understood when she quit another job and moved back home. I understood when she borrowed money she never repaid. I even understood yesterday. What I don't understand is why every solution always starts with taking something that belongs to me. Neither of them could answer. Emily quietly spoke. I didn't ask them to do this. I looked at her. Didn't you? She hesitated. I mean, I knew they wanted to help, so you accepted my house. She lowered her eyes. I thought you already had another one planned. I laughed once, not because anything was funny, because I finally realized something. Emily genuinely believed successful people simply had endless replacements waiting. Lose one house, buy another. Lose one opportunity, find another. She had never experienced earning something that couldn't easily be replaced. Then Dad said something that changed everything. We already spent part of the money. I frowned. What money? The money from the developer. The room suddenly felt smaller. You haven't sold anything. No, but, he swallowed. We signed a preliminary agreement. How much? Mom whispered. $200,000. I stared at them. You accepted an advance? Dad nodded. They said the sale was guaranteed. It isn't. We know that now. I looked around the room. For the first time, I noticed expensive new furniture, a luxury coffee machine, fresh renovations. Then I remembered. Emily's new SUV, her vacation photos, the designer handbags she'd suddenly started carrying. It hadn't been coincidence. They had already spent money they legally didn't own. Then I demanded to see the contract. Dad disappeared into the study. He returned carrying another folder. As soon as I opened it, every instinct I had as a real estate attorney screamed. The contract wasn't just careless, it was fraudulent. The developer had been told Emily owned both the land and the house. Supporting documents included copies of my building permits, construction invoices, property surveys, even architectural plans I'd paid for. Someone had taken everything from my filing cabinet without permission. I looked up slowly. Who gave them these? No one answered. Who? Emily began crying. I did. She spoke so quietly I almost missed it. I still had the spare key. I felt my stomach drop. The spare key. I'd given it to her years ago. For emergencies. She twisted her hands together. Mom and Dad asked if I could find anything that proved I owned the property. So you broke into my house? I used the key. You entered my office? I only copied the papers. You stole legal documents. I put everything back. I looked at her. You searched through my entire life, and you still thought you deserved the house? She couldn't answer. My phone buzzed. Mr. Howard. Sarah? Yes? I've just received something interesting. What? The county clerk's office called. They found another document filed yesterday. What kind of document? His voice became unusually serious. A deed. I thought the transfer was already recorded. So did I. This one, he paused, contains your signature. Ice spread through my chest. I never signed anything. I know. Another silence. Then he said 5 words that changed everything. Someone forged your name, Sarah. Within an hour, we were sitting inside the county records office. The forged deed lay in front of me. At first glance, it looked perfect, even my signature, until I noticed one tiny detail: the date. Whoever forged the document had copied my signature from a legal filing I completed 6 years ago. They had duplicated every curve, every stroke, every flourish, except one. 6 years ago, I still signed my middle name in full. 3 years later, I'd legally shortened it after getting married. Only someone using an old document would make that mistake. I slowly looked toward Emily, then toward my parents. One of them knew exactly where that old paperwork had come from, and whoever it was had just committed felony forgery. The words echoed in my head. The State Fraud Division has opened a criminal investigation. For several seconds, no one spoke. Emily's face turned ghost white. My father slowly lowered himself into a chair. My mother grabbed the edge of the table as though she might collapse. I looked at the forged deed lying in front of me. It wasn't just a fake signature, it was a felony. Someone had crossed a line that couldn't simply be apologized away. 3 days later, every member of my family received the same certified letter. Notice of investigation. The county recorder had frozen every transaction involving the property. No one could sell it, no one could refinance it, no one could borrow against it. The developer immediately suspended the $60 million project. Within hours, the news spread through town. The family that had celebrated giving away a beautiful new home was now being investigated for property fraud. The first person to knock on my office door wasn't a detective, it was Emily. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had smiled during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Her expensive handbag was gone. Her makeup was smeared. She looked exhausted. "I just want to talk." I nodded toward the chair. "Sit." For nearly a minute, she said nothing. Finally, "I'm sorry." I leaned back. "For what?" "For everything." "No." I shook my head. "Be specific." She looked confused. "What?" "People who are truly sorry know exactly what they're apologizing for." She lowered her eyes. "I copied your house keys. I searched your office. I stole your paperwork. I lied to the developer. I let Mom and Dad believe I deserved your house." She stopped, then whispered, "And I wanted your life." The room became very quiet. "I spent years telling myself you were lucky." She laughed bitterly. "You always had a good job. You bought a house. You never worried about money. I thought everything came easily for you." I smiled sadly. "You know what the funny part is?" She looked up. "You watched me build that house. You saw every weekend I spent working. You knew I missed vacations. You knew I skipped birthdays because I was working overtime. You saw every sacrifice. But somehow, you only noticed the finished house, not the years that built it." Emily started crying again. "I know." "No," I replied gently. "I think this is the first time you actually do." That afternoon, I met with Detective Laura Mitchell from the State Fraud Division. She placed a thick file across the conference table. "We've finished reviewing the evidence." She opened the folder. Inside were bank records, emails, phone logs, security camera footage. Every movement surrounding the forged deed had been reconstructed. Technology had quietly done what memories never could. It remembered everything. "The good news," she said, "we don't believe your parents planned the forgery." I frowned. "Then who?" She slid forward a security image. County Records Office, 2 weeks earlier. Emily standing at the filing counter, holding a folder. Another image, a print shop. Emily scanning legal documents. Then another, a stationery store, buying specialized transfer paper. Emily looked down. "I was trying to fix everything." The detective nodded. "We believe you, but intent doesn't erase fraud." Emily closed her eyes. "I know." The detective surprised everyone with her next question. She looked at me. "Miss Bennett, Would you be willing to participate in a restorative settlement conference before formal charges are filed? Dad looked confused. What does that mean? It means the victim has an opportunity to resolve certain civil matters before criminal prosecution moves forward. Everyone turned toward me. Again, they were waiting for me to save them, just like always. Only this time, the choice actually belonged to me. That night, I drove to Grandma Grace's cemetery. The grass had just been cut, fresh flowers rested beside her headstone. I sat on the old wooden bench she'd loved. For almost an hour, I didn't say a word. Then I unfolded the handwritten letter she'd left inside the envelope. One paragraph I'd missed earlier caught my attention. Sarah, justice and revenge often look identical in the beginning. The difference only becomes clear when the story is over. Revenge destroys people. Justice teaches them. Choose carefully. I read those lines again and again until I finally understood. Grandma hadn't protected the land because it was valuable. She protected it because she knew one day it would protect me, not from losing property, from losing myself. The following week, we gathered inside a mediation room instead of a courtroom. No judge, no jury, only lawyers, the developer, the investigators, my parents, Emily, and me. The mediator looked at me. Miss Bennett, what would you like to happen? Everyone expected me to demand the house, or money, or prison. Instead, I slid one folder across the table. Inside was a proposal. I'll sign the development agreement. The room went silent. But, I continued, only under 4 conditions. The mediator nodded. Go on. First, every fraudulent document must be withdrawn. Emily immediately nodded. I'll do it. Second, my parents will publicly acknowledge that the property belonged to me. Dad quietly whispered. Done. Third, every dollar received from the developer will be divided according to the legal ownership established in Grandma's will. The developer quickly reviewed the proposal. It matches the title records. No objections. I looked toward Emily. You'll receive payment for the structure. I'll receive payment for the land. No one receives money that was never legally theirs. Emily slowly nodded. I understand. Then I read the final condition. The room became completely silent. Fourth, I want every dollar my grandmother left me placed into a charitable foundation. Mom looked shocked. What? I smiled. I'm not keeping it. Dad stared at me. Why? Because Grandma didn't spend her life protecting this land so we could destroy each other over it. 6 months later, construction crews arrived. The neighborhood changed forever. The old houses disappeared, including mine. I watched the demolition from across the street. Surprisingly, I didn't cry, because home was never those walls. Home was always the values Grandma tried to teach me. No one could bulldoze those. The foundation officially opened the following spring. Its name appeared in simple bronze letters above the entrance. The Grace Bennett Foundation. Its mission was simple: provide free legal assistance to families dealing with inheritance disputes, property fraud, and financial exploitation. Every service was free because I knew firsthand how expensive injustice could become. The local newspaper asked why I'd chosen that project instead of keeping the money. I answered honestly, because property wasn't the most valuable thing I almost lost. What was? My ability to trust. And helping other families protect theirs felt like the best investment I could make. My parents came to the opening ceremony. They stood quietly in the back, not asking for recognition, not asking for forgiveness, simply watching as guests toured the building. My father slowly walked over. He held something wrapped in old newspaper. I found this while cleaning the attic. Inside was a tiny wooden birdhouse. I recognized it instantly. I'd built it with Grandpa when I was 9. I smiled. I thought this disappeared. Dad nodded. It did. He looked toward Emily. She broke it. Emily immediately lowered her head. Dad continued. Your mother and I told you it was an accident. It wasn't. We kept asking you to forgive things you never should have had to forgive. There it was, the truth. Not dramatic, not loud, just honest. Sometimes that's enough. A year later, Emily got a job, not because someone found one for her, because she applied, interviewed, failed twice, tried again. Eventually, she became a project coordinator for a local nonprofit. The first paycheck she ever earned entirely on her own, she framed, not because of the amount, because she'd finally earned something no one could give her. One evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. Just one photograph. Grandma's old garden, completely restored. Underneath it, she wrote, "I finally understand why Grandma left you the land." I smiled, then typed back 4 simple words. She believed I would protect it. A few seconds later, another message appeared. No, she believed it would protect you. I stared at the screen for a long time, then looked out my office window. For years, I believed my greatest inheritance was 2 acres of land. I had been wrong. The greatest inheritance my grandmother ever gave me was the courage to stop confusing love with sacrifice. Because real family doesn't ask one child to carry everyone else's dreams. Real family stands by each other. And sometimes, the strongest form of revenge isn't taking back what was stolen. It's building a life so honest, so peaceful, and so full that the people who hurt you are finally forced to confront what their choices cost them. Not because you punished them, because the truth did.